the year of the Silver Jubilee, the celebration of 25 years of Elizabeth on the throne, and things have got even worse. The empire is now completely gone. The 60s has basically wiped out the church's centrality to moral and social life in the UK. Britain has been forced to join the European Economic Community. Worse still, it's become dependent upon an IMF loan in 1977. And of course, the Sex Pistols put this iconic image of the Queen, makes it famous with their song God Save the Queen, which was immediately banned by the BBC and went straight to #1 as a consequence. Charles and Diana then offer yet another hope for the recovery of the royal image. Okay? This seemingly perfectly happy couple announced their engagement in 1981 on the 24th of February. And they have, as you know, and I hope you watched the ABC video from the course website, had the ultimate fairy tale wedding. And everything seemed to be rosy in the garden. This wedding attracted a new scale of global attention. The country was awash with celebrations and with happiness. Children like myself got special souvenir mugs and glasses, which you can now pick up in charity stores if you go to the UK, or you can just buy mine off me. And there's a new sort of glamour and romance back in the family. And it's a generation that looks pretty different. It's a generation that makes sense to people of my generation who didn't grow up with the empire and the centrality of the Anglican Church. This was a generation that seemed to be making the monarchy look forward and trying to make it seem relevant again. Okay, so Charles, for instance, was engaged in a series of campaigns about trying to recuperate a sense of social community. He set up his trust, the Prince's Trust, in 1976 to help disadvantaged youths. He became a big critic of architectural postmodernism and the redesign of British cities in the 60s for ripping out the heart of urban communities. And then, of course, he embraced organic farming. All of these initiatives, I'm suggesting, is a way about trying to make society whole again. Okay, a sort of to rediscover a type of organic, natural community, with, of course, the monarchy at its head. Diana, in contrast, was the royal with the popular touch, but also with, it seemed, and this was really, stark and shocking news, an emotionally literate member of the royal family. This has never been known to have happened before, and she seemed to be, someone who could literally reach out and touch the population at large. That sounds a little creepy. I didn't mean it like that, but and as we all know, she becomes increasingly associated with trying to care for the sick and the disadvantaged. But this image of Diana, especially as having embraced what her brother called the constituency of the rejected, those suffering from HIV, victims of landmines, people with eating disorders, etc., etc. This image of Diana was a carefully cultivated one. Okay, and here again you see the intricate embrace that the royal family has with the media that increasingly depends upon to project its message. The story that she told, most famously in this Panorama interview in 1995, where she said she wanted to be known as the Queen of Hearts. Okay, very touching. The story was here, she had suffered like those whose suffering she embraced. She had been rejected by this patriarchal, domineering institution of the royal family. The institution that she had promised to revive had basically turned her out. Now, as we all know, I suspect you all know, she dies in a car crash in Paris with Dodi Fayed on the 31st of August 1997. Many people felt that this was a JFK type of moment, that everyone could remember where they were when Diana died. Can anyone here remember where they were? Your name? Right. Okay, but you don't count because you're clearly a Brit. So someone else. Yeah. Your name.
I'm Lisa.
Yeah.
I was getting ready to go to school as like a first grade or something, and my mom didn't make my breakfast because she was like so obsessed with Diana dying, had to bring it on.
As a matter of interest, let's do a poll by a show of hands. How many of you actually remember this happening? Oh. See, I could have done my old Princess Di lecture. I didn't have to spend the weekend writing this. Damn. Okay, so the point is you all remember this event. You'll probably remember where you were. And you certainly remember the sort of frenzy of coverage it received across the world. In Britain, there was an unprecedented degree of national mourning. Shrines popped up, vigils were held, condolences books were opened, memorial funds were launched, and of course 1,000 tacky commemorative commodities, and tons and tons and tons of flowers. 15,000 tons of flowers laying at Kensington Palace, her London residence alone. 15,000 tons of flowers. And as we know, when people die, this is the point in which the living try and make sense not just of their death, but of their life as a whole. Most funerals tend to be not just sad events, but events where people sort of try and fight for the meaning of that life in their different addresses and memories that they have of that person. And it was no different with the death of Diana. So the first person into the ring was, of course, the very media-savvy Tony Blair, who had just been elected Prime Minister 3 months earlier, I think pretty much, well, in May, so however many months that is, after 18 years of the Conservative government having been in power since the election of Mrs. Thatcher in 1979. Blair comes around as the head of the Labour Party, the alternative. Well, there is another party, but let's basically forget about them because they don't really count at this point. Comes along as again a new generation, seemingly a new ideology, and embraces this moment as a way of trying to claim that Diana is what he calls the people's princess. Like Blair, she seems to care for community. He tries to claim her as part of this new sort of vision of a socially caring community, in marked contrast to the denigration of community under the Thatcher administrations and successors. Mrs. Thatcher had famously declared there's no such thing as society. And here is Blair using Diana as a way of trying to say, look, we do care, and we are about trying to reconstruct community. So that's Blair's take. Her brother, Earl Spencer, because remember, Diana came from a well-posh family, a titled family, described Diana as the heroine of a new Britain of hearts and flowers, that she had hadn't just brought emotional literacy to the royal family, she had created this culture in Britain that allowed grown men to openly cry in the streets. Okay? And Brits tend to think of themselves, or used to think of themselves, as people with, the so-called stiff upper lip, very reserved, emotionally contained. And here was during the celebrations of her death, during the period of mourning, people openly grieving in public. In contrast, Christopher Hitchens, who you all know, yes? British journalist, works a lot over here, sometimes at the School of Journalism. Yeah? No, Christopher Hitchens? Is he American? He's like me? Dear, I'm sorry. We spread like diseases. Hitchens says, no, this is ridiculous. Okay, this has all got completely out of hand. Diana should not be understood as a victim. She used the poor and the sick as accessories in her own drama, in her own fights in the royal family to project her own image. And many others also argued that the sort of mass display of grief constituted what was described as mass hysteria, and one commentator even described it as sentimental fascism. This insistence that everyone had to grieve openly and publicly. This attitude, I think, and you see, if any of you have seen the movie The Queen, I think you get that, because the Queen herself is a victim of this insistence that everyone has to grieve publicly. The Sun, the leading tabloid in Britain, owned by Rupert Murdoch, had this editorial a few days after the death. Not one word has come from a royal lip. Not one tear has been shed in public from a royal eye. It is as if no one in the royal family has a soul. The House of Windsor seems a cold, compassion-free zone where duty and protocol push emotions in a corner. So you see, this is the script of the movie The Queen. Yeah, where those who don't grieve openly in public are seen to represent tradition, to be stuffy, to have no soul. Okay, very strong words. Whereas those who grieve publicly are, good people. And as we know, the end result of this is that the Queen has to indeed go down to the flowers outside Buckingham Palace and pay her respect, and in the end has to do a broadcast, and it's all because she saw a deer, if you've seen the movie. Feminists also have their own take on Diana. Julie Burchill, a feminist journalist, wrote a book called Diana in 1998, holding Diana up as a feminist hero because she battled against this patriarchal institution and an unloving husband. The Gay Times also celebrated Diana as a gay icon, the original glamour queen, because of her support for HIV charities. And the Panorama interview was often held out as a classic coming out moment. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that in a way Diana was made, the sort of meaning and image of Diana was made most of all in her at the moment of her death. Right, do we have any questions before, because I've just been talking for a full 30 minutes and I should just pause before we get on to the next section in case anyone has any questions about that part. And your name? Jonathan. So the question